Hello, everyone, and I have with me Jamil Farshchi, who's the CISO at Equifax. And he's with us here today to talk about the journey at Equifax, the transformation he has driven, and also to give us advice on how we should be thinking about risk management and security at our companies. Welcome to the show, Jamil. In September of 2017, Equifax announced a data breach that exposed the personal information of 147 million people. This was considered one of the largest digital burglaries of that time. All eyes were on Equifax: consumers, customers, partners, regulators, and governments. And you joined Equifax after that breach of historic proportions. What happened?
Yeah, it was. First off, thanks for having me today. That day, September 7th, 2017, is one that I'll never forget. I'm in the office and I see on the headlines the news breaks around the breach. 147 million consumers affected by the sensitive information that was compromised. And immediately my phone blows up. The CEO's calling, several board meetings. The whole team is scrambling everywhere. So it was chaotic. But I wasn't even at Equifax. I was at Home Depot at the time. My third year in, I came in after to help rebuild that program after their breach. And so you can imagine with that level of chaos, it's just being a customer of Equifax, what it was like to be at Equifax, an employee there. So it was a punch in the gut for the company, and it shook the organization to its core. Um, there was a multitude of factors that led to it. A variety of technical gaps in terms of patching and certificates and segmentation and things like that. But I think the essence of it, the root cause, was a failure in the culture of the organization at large, and that's what we've been focused on since day one.
Tell us about, so you took all that into stock, but then you started to work towards fixing it the moment you came in. How did you fix it?
We rebuilt from the ground up. We tore everything down. We made a $1.5 billion investment in our technology transformation. We put a heavy emphasis on bringing in the best talent. We hired over 1,000 people to be able to help us in the security and technology space. And then, like I said before, we put this demonstrable focus on the culture of the organization. And so we instituted a variety of different measures from the top down to be able to incent people to do the right thing, to make sure that security is first and foremost in every employee's minds, day in and day out. And collectively, with all of those initiatives that we brought to bear, it allowed us to be able to navigate through that difficult situation and ultimately arrive where we are today.
As you mentioned, it was a difficult situation, and you talked a fair bit of culture. You mentioned it a couple of times already. Tell me about leadership. How did you lead through a traumatic time of this kind?
Gosh, it was so traumatic. It's somewhat like I don't know. It's like a mud run, but at marathon length that you're running at full speed. You start off, you're sprinting, everything sort of feels good. You're like, oh, I'm gonna crush this thing, and then you turn the corner and there's a 100-foot rope that you have to climb, or monkey bars that you have to get over, or swim that you have to do. There's always another surprise around every single corner. And when you're going through it, you've also got an organization, a workforce that's largely demoralized. They've gone through something, a watershed moment that's been very traumatic to them, especially when you look at it from a security standpoint. You've got these professionals who have given their lives to this discipline, and everything is wrapped up into it. And then all of a sudden, just overnight, you've got everyone in the world is pointing their fingers at you. I mean, we had people that would literally spit on our employees as they were walking out of the office. It was so bad. What I do is I try to take it one step at a time. I think that being authentic is very critical to being able to help lead a team. I'm not a big fan of corporate speak and having things come down from on high that is very robotic. So being authentic is one of the key things. But then just as importantly, it's establishing strong mile markers so that people can see that the efforts that they're putting in every single day are actually making progress. They don't have to be huge things, but little steps at a time. And what those do is it builds up confidence. It builds up this level of commitment and camaraderie amongst the team so that you can tackle any hurdle that you have in front of you, as well as be able to address the multitude of surprises that'll inevitably hit you as you're going through an initiative like this. Ours was extreme because it was, in the wake of this breach, and it was a major transformation. But digital transformations are happening in organizations all throughout the world right now at an extreme pace. And so I think a lot of the things that we did here could easily be translated to other organizations today as well.
Leadership matters most at these moments, and thank you for sharing those perspectives. Trust is essential to all businesses. It's at the core of relationships, engagement, and loyalty between customers and companies. And in a breach, a lot of that trust gets eroded. How did you regain the trust at Equifax, and how did you build it from there?
Boy, did we lose trust. Overnight, we lost 40% of our market cap, our CEO, our head of security, our head of technology, all exited the company. Regulators were furious with us, customers, you name it. So we had lost a lot of trust in the wake of the breach. And it's easy to look at any one of those specific constituent groups and say, oh man, this is really terrible. But we had it all happening at the same time. And one of the most common questions I got was just what you asked, which is, how are you going to rebuild the trust? I think it boils down to doing what you say you're going to do. I remember doing a congressional testimony shortly after I started, and I did it with my boss, our CEO, and he, under oath, put up his right hand and said, "We will be a leader in security." Now, look, I think in this day and age, talk is fairly cheap, but what we did thereafter was back it up with a tremendous number of actions, whether it's that $1.5 billion I was talking about, the thousands of people that we hired. But I think most importantly, we really leaned in on transparency. We did what we said we were going to do and to become a leader, but at the same time, we tried to carry and bring everyone else along with us on that journey. The number of customer meetings I've had and the number of trips I've had around the globe with regulators and customers and so forth to just talk about the lessons that we learned throughout that experience, how to better shape their programs, what to be more aware of from a threat perspective. It was substantial. And I think that the culmination of all of those steps ultimately led us to be able to rebuild that trust. And when you look at it today, the good security clearly is good for the bottom line. We have now consistently exceeded expectations. We have record revenues, and this isn't just some upstart thing. This is record revenues for a company that's 122 years old. So all of those efforts ultimately generated meaningful traction with trust, and that trust translated into better business performance.
You talked about how security is both important for the bottom line and the top line. Is this just the CISO's job? How do other executives in the company contribute to this as well?
It's absolutely not the CISO's job. One of the things I always tell folks is that, and my team in particular, is, if I'm walking down the hall and I run into somebody and I say, hey, who's responsible for security here? And they point back at me, Jamil, who's in charge of it as a CISO. I haven't done my job, because security is every single employee's responsibility throughout the organization. One of the greatest threats that any organization faces actually comes from the front lines. You look at things like phishing, for example. The bad guys know that typically the general rank and file, someone in finance or accounting or whatever, doesn't really know much about security, doesn't care about it, and therefore doesn't focus on it. And so they're a prime target. So there's no question in my mind that if you want to be a leader in this space, if you want to defend against the threats, it's got to be something that's accepted broad base across the entire organization. And everyone plays a part. Like you mentioned the executives, for example. The CFO and his or her team, needs to be able to ensure that we get the right resources to be able to secure the organization. The general counsel needs to make sure that we've got the right view and lens on the regulatory landscape. Every business unit leader needs to be able to balance the risk with the various opportunities that are in front of them. And so it certainly takes a village to be able to do this, everyone coming together. But again, I can speak for Equifax in the sense that we've brought all of those pieces and parts together. And as a result, we've done outstanding things from both a risk reduction standpoint, as well as just running the business in a really effective way that's outperforming anything anyone thought we would do, certainly 3 years ago.
You're spot on. Security is a lifestyle that we need everyone in the company to actually take on. Though the spiritual leadership probably comes from the CISO, it is something that everyone all across the breadth and depth of the organization has to undertake. With technology, connectivity, commerce, mobile, and social trends, every business is going online, it's going digital. How should companies think of risk, security, and fraud? And how should CXOs and boards think of the investments in cybersecurity?
In this day and age, it's a non-negotiable. I mean, when you look at and you said it, when you look at the broader landscape, the volume of digital assets and our reliance, both personally and professionally, on digital communications, it is unprecedented. And the growth rate is monumental. And when this happens, the value of those assets, the value of disruption from an operational standpoint increases dramatically. And that's why I think you see a lot of the activity nowadays focused on things like ransomware. It's great for them to be able to target organizations because there's so much at stake. And so I think that it's absolutely non-negotiable for organizations to be putting their best foot forward as it relates to it, because there are a few things I think today that can undermine an organization's credibility and their ability to continually operate than a cyber threat. I mean, you get ransomware and all of your technical assets are down in the blink of an eye. There's regulators are going to descend on your organization. The ramifications can be potentially catastrophic. And so to be able to do that, we all need to be good risk managers and assess those risks and invest appropriately to be able to manage them, just like anything else.
On the one hand, there is an escalation of cyber threats. On the other hand, security actually is becoming an opportunity to distinguish as well. Can you help us understand this landscape of emerging threats as you see it? And then also maybe talk a little bit about the opportunities that you see for businesses to thrive based on their cybersecurity experience.
Yeah, the landscape, as I mentioned, is consistently evolving. One of the things that's concerned me as of late is the rapid evolution of the attackers. Back in the day, you'd see a new sort of novel kind of attack, once every few years. But nowadays, that cycle time has reduced dramatically. I mean, I'll look back to just I think it was last November or December when the SolarWinds attack occurred. So for those of you who don't know, like the attackers compromised the digital supply chain organization that delivered software that a lot of companies use their software and promulgated it throughout all of their customer base, tens of thousands of different companies. And so that happened, and that was novel, and that was a big deal. But it turned out that it was led by the Russians, so it was more on the espionage side. Well, fast forward a few months from there, earlier this spring, and you've got Kaseya, where it's a criminal actor in this case. And what they do is leverage some of the same techniques that were successful in SolarWinds, but then they throw on the ransomware component on top of it so they can monetize that attack. It didn't used to happen that fast. And when the attackers are able to learn and evolve as quickly as they are, it puts us all in a difficult position. In terms of opportunities, I think they're countless. And I think it all boils back to what you were talking about earlier around trust. I think successful businesses nowadays are predicated on trust. If the consumers and your customers trust you, then you're going to build and establish a really strong relationship with them, which is going to ultimately generate success in the future. You don't have that trust, and you won't gain that trust, and you won't keep that trust if you aren't able to protect the data of your customers and of the various consumers out there. And so I think it is part and parcel, which is why when you look at the various opportunities, whether it's on the digital identity front or the digital supply chain or whatever it might be, to ensure that you're embedding the right controls and risk management methodologies in there so that you can truly unlock the value of any given opportunity. If you just focus on the opportunity side, certainly given today's threat landscape, it's going to bite you. If not today, tomorrow.
There's a technology journey, there's the business journey, there's journey with all the stakeholders externally. But the people part of security is one of the biggest transformations a company goes through. Culture and education have a big role to play in a more secure business. Tell us about your thoughts on how companies can build the right risk and security culture, and how should we go about educating customers to make things safe, and also at the same time educating and training all our employees to do that on their behalf.
I think one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult aspect within any organization is changing culture. It's very hard. It takes a multitude of different things that you're doing, multitude of approaches to be able to solve for it. And it takes a long time, which is why I talk to a lot of companies after the incidents and breaches and so forth that they have. And a lot of them they're like, oh, that's, training and all this other stuff is great, but I'm going to wait on that because I've got to install these tools and stuff first. I think that's a mistake. I think it's a big mistake, in fact, because it takes so long to be able to shift the culture of an organization. Our approach, and we've made great progress on it, but I wouldn't say that we're even done with that journey itself, because it does take that long. But we took a multitude of different steps, and it started from the top. So everything from the board of directors and the level of frequency that I was meeting with them, we changed our organizational structure so that the security organization, my role, reports directly to our CEO. We instituted a mechanism for every bonus eligible employee that has a specific security component in it. So if security didn't meet their goals, then everyone saw a haircut on their potential bonus opportunity. Didn't matter where you were. And since that time, we've expanded it to every employee in the entire company as well. And then finally, we instituted a process from training where every single employee gets an automated update every single month on a series of their security behaviors, and we score them. We benchmark them. And so they can see how they're performing in aggregate. They can see how they're performing relative to their peers, other folks in their organization, and so forth. And all of these things combined, in addition to a slew of other things, have helped us to be able to turn that tide to where today things like our click-through rates from phishing or our security behaviors in general are off the charts. The third parties that evaluate us are consistently like, what are you guys putting in the water over there at Equifax? Because like you guys really eat, sleep, and breathe security, and you're doing it the right way. So it takes time, but you've got to start today if you're ever going to make that long-term shift.
And what are the investments you've made on the customer side? I'm sure you've done a lot. I see it when I go to the Equifax side. How much of a campaign was that in your strategy?
It's one of the things I'm honestly most proud of with this. A lot of organizations in the wake of a breach, they try to just fix and forget or patch it and move on and hope everyone else just eventually forgets and moves on to the next thing. Not only did we make the investments to be able to transform our company, we put a lot of money toward evolving and improving our products as well, and building security into them from the get-go. So not only do we offer things like breach services and fraud monitoring and things like that, and we uplifted those, but in addition to it, we've put a concerted effort behind working directly with our customers to be able to help them improve their security practices so that they don't repeat some of the same mistakes that we did. And furthermore, we're working with policymakers to be able to help shore up our broader ecosystem, whether it's small to medium-sized businesses or even the large ones, to be able to shape regulation in a way that's going to be able to help our country and the world, hopefully, do a better job at being able to defend themselves. And I think this is ultimately going to be the legacy that we'll all leave in the wake of what we experienced, is that I think we're moving the bar up. I think that we're rising the tide and helping to try to lift all boats. And we're just one party, but what we've been able to do is get so much momentum and so many other organizations that all want the same thing. And we've unified that, and we're helping to be able to drive broader change, not just for Equifax, but for the ecosystem at large.
That is so well said. This is a common cause. And I think these are places where companies can actually collaborate together. And I see more and more of that happening recently. With so much going on, most of the world still getting used to the implications of being online. People often confuse the concept of security and privacy. What is the difference in your mind, and how should companies think about building privacy right for their customers as well?
I think it goes back to transparency. Look, security is about making sure that your locks are working and the data is protected from the bad guys. When you talk about privacy, it's about establishing trust with the individuals and allowing them visibility in terms of what you have and what you are doing with the data that they've entrusted you with. And one of the things that we've done here is we've tried to marry those up. So within my edict, it includes privacy as well. And one of the reasons we chose to do that is that many of the same controls, many of the same things that one would do on the pure play security side also apply on the privacy side as well. And so we're trying to take this very meticulous and thoughtful approach to making it holistic, because while they are two different things, ultimately they do boil back down to trust and transparency, which I think are key factors in success as it relates to either one of those two areas.
That's great. I have a couple more questions. One is,
things that if folks would just apply them on a consistent basis, it's going to make their lives so much better in the long run. Using different passwords for the sites that you visit and you regularly use, like backing up your system so that you actually have another copy of the data that you have. I was a neighbor of mine, an 83-year-old woman, earlier this year. She was a victim of a ransomware attack. And, she called me because I'm in my neighborhood. I'm the resident security guy. And so everyone calls me when they have problems like this. And so I go over there and yeah, she was a victim of this. Her computer was locked up and it rocked her to her core because she didn't have her pictures of her grandkids and things like that. And it was tough for me because you look at the situation and there was really nothing you could do. It was locked up. Either she paid the ransom, and who knows if it'll even work, or she has to start from scratch and she won't ever see those pictures again. And if individuals would put those practices into play, they're pretty basic, they're pretty easy to do, then I think we'd all be in a better place and this threat wouldn't be nearly as monumental as it is today.
And the final question for you is, what are the top 3 things that you do personally as a part of your security hygiene?
For me, it's all around, I think, mental. I try to get up at the same time every single morning. I try to be honest with myself and as authentic as I can with the team. And I try to allocate some level of time that's just for myself where I can think and actually focus on stuff instead of getting caught in that rat race all the time. And I think if you do that, you're going to position yourself to have better mental health. And as a result, you're going to perform better and allow your team to be able to do their job and empower them to be successful in the long run.
Jamil, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all your wisdom, everything from how you started at Equifax and led the charge on a complete turnaround and transformation, all the way up to advice on what consumers should be doing to protect themselves online. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.